For those of you just tuning in, 3 o'clock here in the East Coast, you're watching ABC News live coverage of the scene unfolding at Fort Lauderdale Airport this afternoon. A lone gunman, it's believed at this point that it was a lone gunman, walked into Terminal 2, the baggage claim, opening fire. At least 5 people were killed right there on the scene. It's believed at this point 8 people are injured, were hit also in the shooting in some way. 8 injuries. That number fluid all afternoon as we've been on the air, but at least 5 people dead. We knew early on from the Broward County Sheriff Department that they did believe they were dealing with multiple casualties and a number of fatalities, and we now know that that number is 5 people dead. And we've heard from eyewitnesses all afternoon here who describe the gunman walking through that baggage claim, opening fire, the cracking noise, the crackling noise of the gunfire, and the fact that workers who stood there and watched this unfold in horror and disbelief when they saw the gunman for themselves and had to dive behind the kiosks right there in the baggage claim. I'm joined by our chief investigative correspondent, Brian Ross, who's been here with me on the desk now for a couple of hours after we first learned of this unfolding situation. And as I was mentioning, Senator Nelson on the phone, this was reporting that we had not heard yet, but he'd been told by authorities right away that the suspect being led away, and we had an image of that, unclear if that's the actual suspect, but someone being led away, had a military ID on them, and that the name associated with it, he'd been told, was Esteban Santiago.
That's right, and federal law enforcement authorities and aviation security officials have told us that is the name they are working in now as the possible shooter. You want to caution that sometimes people end up with the ID of somebody else. If that is the name, he is a 26-year-old male, born in New Jersey, with addresses going back to Anchorage, Alaska.
Mm-hmm. And again, we caution that this is just initial reporting attached to the name that we had been given by Senator Nelson. Now federal authorities saying that that is in fact the name that at least early on they're going with and now investigating, but that's early word coming in on the individual we might be looking at. We certainly do not know if that's indeed the person, because as you point out, and smartly, oftentimes these IDs get mixed up, or a gunman will purposely have an ID
He'll
belonging
steal it from somebody else
and
use that as a way to throw away. But it's clear from what we're seeing in these pictures, David, that scene is not cleared. They have not cleared that scene.
Right. Chief Brown, when you look at these pictures and how intense the scene still is, as some of these pictures come in now, people down behind cars, the running that we see there, and it's hard to tell which ones are actually live and which ones are coming in from moments ago, but we have seen some frantic moments right up until just a short time ago. This is an unfolding situation, and this is what happens when you have additional reports of possible further incidents being reported. And that's often the case after an incident, given the chaos, and we heard of the shouting and the screaming, people so concerned.
Yes, the anxiety levels of people when you have these type of incidents just raises to the highest level, and any loud noise from here forward throughout the day will cause reactions like this, where people just will start running when they hear a loud bang or a scaffold fall, or some worker maybe drops something and makes just a loud banging noise. It creates this, and it also could be other co-conspirators with this situation and another active shooter. So you can't eliminate anything now. And people pretty much, their psychology of, I'm not safe in this area, it causes you to run and do things, hunker down, and law enforcement have to react to these types of witness accounts that they heard a loud noise, they thought it might be shooting. And so you have to treat them all as if they're real critical incidents happening throughout the day.
And I want to get back to Pierre Thomas, Chief Brown, who's with us. He's our senior justice correspondent, because Pierre, you're learning something new from your sources?
Yeah, again, the federal source that I spoke to had that name that Senator Nelson gave us on our air, but this source was cautioning that, again, early in these investigations, you have to take your time, make sure that the person that you have in custody is actually the person that from the ID that you're looking in. And 2 sources are now emphasizing that so far they have not been given any clear idea on what the motive for the shooting was. And again, these are people directly communicating with folks down in Florida. So it's still a very fluid situation. They're being very careful to try to meticulously go through this investigation, run down this name. Again, there will be multiple people with that sort of name. So as you can imagine, David, it will take some time to make sure that they have the actual person, that they can make sure that they're looking at the actual shooter, know exactly who that person is, and their complete background. The FBI, Homeland Security, Secret Service, multiple law enforcement agencies checking their databases to see what they can find out about this particular name, again, trying to match it with the individual in custody.
Yeah, excusing extreme care in investigating the name. Federal sources are telling us, which is why we are being careful. Of course, that name is just one of the early indicators of what's been gleaned from that one military ID that they found on the suspect. But as Brian Ross pointed out earlier, so as is often the case, sometimes these military IDs are stolen or purposely meant to throw off law enforcement in the early hours after an incident like this.